Good morning, everyone. So I had prepared remarks that are sitting right over there, so I'm obviously winging it. Thank you all for being here. And so many people got up early. Where's Brew? Brew was very concerned about this not being well attended, but I knew it was going to be really well attended because look at this all-star cast that we have as panelists. So thank you all for being here for a very important discussion, timely, topical. I think Julia is spending more time than she probably thought she would working with Senators Cantwell and Wickers and Booker around this subject of name, image, and likeness. So we're just starting. July 1st, July, August, September, 90 days in, 100 days in. I'm sure Matt's going to cover all this. But I just wanted to welcome you, and I think I'm meant to introduce Dave Hickey next, or is that what I'm doing? Yeah. Before we get there, I really am excited about this opening. I've been excited about it for a long time, but it's pretty rare. As Mean Joe Green said about the Super Bowl, the anticipation is always greater than the event itself. This has exceeded my expectations. The sessions have just gotten better and better. And for those of you who haven't seen and had dinner plans last night, Missing in Brooks County, you'll know about it because it's going to win big awards and is very powerful and very moving. And, you know, sitting right here on Pennsylvania Avenue, now I'm really going off script. You know, we can just walk down to the White House or we can walk to the Capitol and we can say, you know, at least my whole lifetime, I've been hearing about the need for comprehensive immigration reform. We need it now. We needed it 20, 30 years ago. You see this film, it's very powerful and moving. So I'm just giving you a advice to go find it. And we got to see it last night right here in this room. All right, I'm going to stop because I'll get going. And then all the time will be up. Introduce Dave Hickey, our athletic director, who's been here in D.C. with all the other athletic directors, and it was kind of nice that you could stay over. Dave, thanks.
It's terrific to be here. Welcome to everyone, and welcome to a great group of panelists here that will give us a lot of insight on a very current issue. And as Dr. Robbins said, here over the last 24, 36 hours with our National Division I Athletic Directors annual meeting, of which a bulk of that we were discussing NIL. So really appropriate, and timing is perfect to begin to further explore this and really see how it's launched. So that NIL and this new collegiate, this new college athlete experience that is evolving as we go forward. So what I'd like to talk about just for a minute is our program at the University of Arizona. Certainly we've embraced this challenge, and it is a challenge of name, image, and likeness. But we see it as the extended opportunity, the next step, in the evolution of the student-athlete model and the benefits that have been provided to student-athletes through the last decade. Certainly the college model has changed, and it will continue to change, as we've talked about recently as ADs, but it will change in a way that will further support our student-athletes. That's the way it must change. So during this time, we've seen deregulation of many of the previous restrictions that have been associated with student-athletes. Again, we'll talk more about that, but these limits on financial aid, limits on opportunities for them to really prosper, to grow, to evolve as a person on our campus. So these changes, I think, allow student athletes around the country to more closely resemble what their peers on our campuses go through on a daily basis, and really, grow as young people and become very much prepared for the future. And it's long overdue. We had a choice as an institution on deciding how we would do this. And the standard at our institution and in our athletics program is always to provide an outstanding experience. We are a program of excellence, and whatever we designed, however we went forward, we wanted it to mirror that. And creating the ArizonaEdge, which is our NIL program, was the natural next step for our commitment to foster this culture of excellence at the University of Arizona in our athletics program. And we see the EDGE program as being a significant continuation of our commitment to our student athletes as they go forward. It's designed for our student athletes to develop outstanding skills, very important skills, that they can move on in their professional life, as I said, following their college careers. And our goal is to facilitate the student athletes feeling empowered, to feeling prepared, growing in their experience, and having the opportunity to monetize, to grow to their brand, to learn about how that happens and what they can do in the future. So we also wanted it to be unique to the University of Arizona. I think that's what I'm most proud of. I know the team is most proud of, but the chance to connect to our campus community. Our programs are developed by staff, connection to our academic programs. A couple of the partnerships I'd like to, point out really quickly is and these folks played a significant role in getting us to where we are today. Kind of an Arizona homegrown program, but content provided by the Eller Executive Education Program at the Eller College of Management, and it's given our program a number of the modules and educational opportunities from the business side of what's going on. And then at the same time, the James E. College of Law has been incredibly involved with this and taking a look at the whole legal side and providing, again, educational opportunities for our students to be tapped into what they need to know going forward. And that's been critical to those two foundational groups have been critical to our NIL program. I'd also like to recognize the Arizona Forge program for its support in educating student athletes about the entrepreneurial thinking that is important when you go forward in this manner. So it's just the beginning on our campus. We have great partnerships across campus, and this will continue to grow and provide the support to our student athletes as they go forward. It's not really just only an educational tool. It's also a point of connection between our student athletes and entities that are interested in exploring the NIL marketplace, the opportunities that are there, and to facilitate that a place where our business communities and those who want to support and connect with student athletes, where they can connect, in a very seamless way to those and bring awareness about the opportunities around NIL. So anyone who's interested in connecting with our student athletes can go to our ArizonaEdge marketplace, really a home to bring people together and to see what opportunities are out there and how the connection points can be made. So really trying to provide a seamless platform for this marketplace to grow and our student athletes to be engaged in. We also have an incredible partner. We'll hear from Jim as one of the panelists of Influencer that serves as the best-in-class platform for student athletes to build and grow their personal brands. And that's really what this is about, how you grow that personal brand. It serves as a conduit between athletics and the student athletes. It facilitates our student athletes utilizing athletics-related content, the content that's out there, all the pieces that involve our student athletes, how they can grab that content and enhance their brand, and their brand management and engage fans and business-related entities. And Jim will talk much more about that. Again, world-class, best-in-class for our student athletes. So we're excited about this great partnership with Influencer. So we have an outstanding panel today. As I said, thanks for everyone for being here. Thanks for spending some time with us as the panel. I really look forward to the lively discussion. It is an incredibly current topic for college athletics and how the overall enterprise of intercollegiate athletics, a big part of all of our campuses, is going to continue to evolve. And so I'm going to turn it over to Matt. So thanks for being here, Matt. And thanks everyone for being here. Bear down, go Cats.
Thank you, Dave. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Appreciate your leadership, Dr. Robbins, your leadership around the EDGE program and this NIL topic. It's, as he said, incredibly timely, and it's a big topic in sports right now. I will say real quick, I just have to say this publicly. I want to thank Dr. Robbins for helping my golf game last year. I was going to Bandon Dunes, and him and Chuck Cecil for about 4 weeks in Tucson, walking the course in Tucson at 110 degrees, helped me get ready for it. I had a great time last year, so I wanted to thank you for that publicly. So good, just this is going to be incredible. The panel's incredible. We had in fact, the discussion we had last night, I wish we had taped it and we could just turn it on right now and have a drink. And we're going to have even more of it tonight or this morning because it really is good. And I think you guys will really love this. Real quick, my name is Matt Muehlebach. I'm a former player at the University of Arizona, played at Arizona from 1987 to 91. I then went to the law school, University of Arizona Law School. Where Dean Miller sitting over here, I'm looking at him, a good friend of mine, and then started work as a corporate attorney in Tucson. And then in the last 7 or 8 years, I think it's been, I've been a general counsel for a private equity firm in Tucson. And then my night job, which sort of brings me into some of these NIL discussions, and I'm going to be able to see this on campus, is that I work for the Pac-12 and Fox Sports 1 and Fox Sports as an analyst. So just getting into the season now. It's fun to have basketball back for me and for, I know, Coach Lloyd, and it's going to be a great year to have fans back. I was the only person last year that could really go to U of A games. I went to the games, I announced them. I was literally the only fan in Tucson that got to go. So it's nice to have everybody back this year. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to go through the panel and introduce everybody just very quickly. And I'm going to have everybody just give a couple words about yourself. And then we have about an hour right now to start this discussion. And then after an hour, we're going to go till 10 o'clock. We'll have about 20 minutes for some Q&A. So feel free to think about some questions. Everybody on the panel has agreed to answer your questions. And so we'll do that the last 20 minutes or so. So without further ado, I'll start on the far, I guess, my right of the panel with Jason Rainey. Another former U of A basketball player, so it's great to see him last week. We saw him in Tucson last week at Coach Olson's memorial at McHale Center, so it was neat to see all the former players. Jason played at Arizona, was originally a walk-on, and then earned a scholarship his junior and senior year, was a great high school player out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, was there in 2000. Arizona's run to the championship in 2001. It was actually the season after Bobby Olson had passed away, and it was an incredible run, as you all might remember. And he's now the Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President of Sports Representation at Wasserman. Jason, go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
That was pretty much everything. I don't have much to add. Just a little background on I think why I'm on the panel. Wasserman is a global talent representation agency. We partner and advise brands, properties, athletes, and musicians all around the globe. And of course, the entry of name, image, and likeness into college has opened up a whole new experience for us and our agents as well, hoping to provide some context and value in relation to that.
Thanks, Jason. And for those that don't know, Wasserman is really the global leader in sports representation. I mean, they are representing. They're on the cutting edge of everything that's going on, especially in this area. So great to have Jason on the panel. Secondly, becoming one of my favorite U of A players of all time, Sam Thomas. And I just want to say a couple things. That is the kind of reaction that Sam gets in Tucson. So I want to give just a quick story. I took my 2 daughters and 2 of their friends to a volleyball game this Friday. They went to the game. My daughter was a shagger for the volleyball team. We left, and we're driving out of the garage, and Sam walked out. I think she was at the game, and the girls in the car went crazy. I mean, they went wild for Sam Thomas. I mean, she is one of the most popular people, as you guys know, in Tucson, and I think Sam is particularly situated to talk about this NIL stuff today and what she's going through, what their team went through last year to get to the run to the national championship. I want to give just a couple little things about her because she probably won't say it because she's very humble. But she was the 2021 Scholar Athlete of the Year for the Pac-12, of the year, for the entire Pac-12. She was also a 2021 COSITA First Team Academic All-American. I told her this morning I was a second team, so she's definitely smarter than I am. So congratulations to her on that. She has a number of other crazy awards, but I just want to give it over to her for a minute and maybe talk a little about where you came from, Sam, and how you got to Arizona and where you're at today.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. Happy to be here. I'm from Vegas, came to Tucson to follow Adia. I believed in her vision, and obviously it worked out for us last year. So happy to be here. I'm a fifth year. I was able to get my COVID year and come back again. So happy to play and happy to be here and represent all the student athletes out there.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. Now we get to Coach Lloyd, who I've had the pleasure of meeting here the last few months. And I want to just jump in. I think most of you know our new basketball coach, Tommy Lloyd, was hired on April 14th, 2021. Thank you to the leadership of President Robbins and Dave Hickey for hiring an unbelievable coach. I think he's going to be incredible for us going forward. I want to just a quick story. This Saturday, I mentioned Lute Olson's memorial. And we were there at McHale Center, and Coach was just running some drills with some of the current players. We were set up for all the old players to sort of say hi to the new players and Coach Lloyd. And I'm sure you hadn't met a lot of the old players. And this was a room, I'm telling you, of alpha dogs. I mean, it was just like you have a lot of very, very accomplished players at the University of Arizona from the history. And, man, he handled it just amazingly. It was tremendous. I was sitting there with Steve Kerr. We were just watching how his authenticity, his toughness, I think his hard work, and being a really smart basketball coach is going to be incredible for us. Coach Lloyd, really happy to have you here.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be here. And I was just thinking, I recognize a lot of you, and I probably met you on campus or at a social event in town, but putting it in context in DC has been it's a little much. It's an honor to be at the University of Arizona. I mean, it's a dream opportunity for me and something I'm definitely going to wrap my arms around. This name, image, and likeness stuff, it's kind of been boiling underneath the surface for a few years now. And when I really considered, making the leap from, I was at Gonzaga for 22 years to come to Arizona, I mean, it was something I thought about. And I knew that Arizona was going to be positioned to be at the cutting edge or the front of the line when it came to servicing our student athletes. So it's a big reason I made the choice to move to Tucson.
Well, we're all very happy you did, and we can't wait for the upcoming years. So, and I can't wait to get into some of the discussions about recruiting and some of the things going on with NIL. Last but not least, we have Jim Cavale, and Jim is originally from New York, but I love Jim because of his entrepreneurial spirit. Has started and been very successful with a number of companies. He's currently the founder and CEO of Influencer, which we'll talk more about here today. And more importantly to me, when I read his bio, he was a shortstop at a Division II school, and I hope I get this right, University of Montevallo. So it was in Alabama, so a very good athlete coming out of high school in New York. And so he has a particular interest, obviously, in this from what he was doing as a student athlete. So, Jim, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, listen, very excited to be here. First off, really appreciative to Dr. Robbins, Dave, Brent, our partnership with the University of Arizona Influencer. We've been around for about 4 years now, and I started this company in 2017. I was building a completely different business, fitness, brick and mortar. We had about 50 locations, and I told my wife, I said, I think after 7 years of building this thing, I need to sell it because this NIL thing is going to happen one day, and we need to build a solution to help student athletes use this stage of college sports to set the stage for the rest of their lives. Like, coaches have been telling student athletes to do that forever, but social media and the ability for athletes to actually put their character out there on social and show their brand is something that, while it's nice they can make some money with NIL now, it's something that actually is going to help them after school, right? You said that earlier when you talked about the fact, Dave, that this is great because it gets kids to think beyond the game while they're wearing the uniform, which is huge because people will take their calls and do a lot of things while they're wearing the uniform that they might not do after it's over. So that's my passion as the student athlete. And we work with about 200 schools, Division I. We work with Division II and III as well. And so Arizona is one of our first Pac-12 partners. We have 10 Pac-12 partners today. So a first mover, and just really excited to to be here to talk about this topic.
That's awesome, Jim. So I'm going to kind of kick it off and start to get into the nuts and bolts of this. And I want to go back to you to start with. Let me first just ask here in the room, when you hear NIL, do you know what that means? Is right a show of hands, like right away, do you know what NIL means? And so it's an acronym for name, image, and likeness. And I wanted to, and before I get to Jim, I wanted to show a shirt that my mother was in town this week and randomly said, Matt, I found this shirt in the closet. Would you like this shirt? Would you like to take this? And it's a picture of the 1989 starting five at Arizona. And if you probably can't see it, but it has my name and number on the right, says 24 Muehlebach, and then it says 00 Cook. Let's see, what was it? 32, I think we know who that is, Sean Elliott. And then further down, Judd Bushler, and number 11, Kenny Lofton. So at the time, when we did that, I remember getting this. I think I bought the shirt myself. I didn't even, not only did I not make money, I bought it. And so I've been talking to Jason about putting together an invoice that I want to send to Dave Hickey for this. I know there's probably not a lot, but there is interest, and it's been 30 years. So I want to get into that, but that's what we're talking about. We're talking about athletes being able to optimize and being able to leverage their name, image, and likeness in the community, for their schools, for themselves. And I think this is going to be just an incredible opportunity for athletes. And we'll talk to Sam, who's in the middle of it now. But I want to start with you, Jim. Just a little history of NIL and then where we are today and what you have seen in the first sort of 6 months.
Yeah, so, listen, the reality is there's 10 different ways we got here. Some would talk about, coach salaries and other expenditures being so high, with athletes not being able to even make $1 off of a shirt like that, that's what led to this. Some people would cite, the O'Bannon case, which is an interesting story if you're familiar with it, right? Like Ed O'Bannon wins a title in the mid-90s at UCLA, and 10 years later, he's working at a used car dealership in Vegas, and the guy who owns the dealership brings him back to his house for dinner, and he starts playing video games with his son. And they're playing video games, and his son says, wait, what year did you play at UCLA? And he said, I played in 94. And he says, well, I've got the 94 UCLA team on this video game. And all of a sudden, Ed O'Bannon's playing the game with himself, right? And the epiphany of what you just did with the T-shirt happening with, his boss's son. And that led to a court case that led to a loss for the NCAA that led to a lot of sensitivity around this topic. When I started Influencer in 2017, all we were doing was saying, hey, get your student athletes access to our app, and we will feed them every picture and video that's being shot by the university, by the national media, so they can share it to their Instagram, their Snapchat, their Twitter, and post more often and grow their following, grow their brand, right? And even just pitching that was like, a lot of schools wouldn't even have a second conversation, because that O'Bannon case created a tremendous amount of sensitivity around any attention going toward the student athlete's brand. But in 2019, California passed a bill that wasn't supposed to begin until 2023, not 2021, around this NIL thing. And the bill basically was what was going to create, the Fair Pay to Play Act, which was an opportunity for student athletes to make money off their name, image, and likeness. And, the NCAA, when they saw that, had a choice to make, which was, do we litigate or do we let it go? And they let it go. And, from there, other states passed bills. And Florida passed the same bill, but to start July 1st of 2021, which really brought the timeline closer. In 2020, the NCAA released their recommendations for NIL regulations. And, there's a lot of different things. It's a 31-page document, but one of the biggest highlights in there is schools would be limited in their involvement in brokering deals for student athletes. Very important thing, because to this point, before NIL, anything anyone outside has ever done with a student athlete goes through the school, right? And all of a sudden, with NIL, we have something where the student athlete has to work around the school with any entity or whoever wants to pay them for their NIL. The NCAA said they would pass those rules in January of this year. They didn't. The Alston ruling then came out about 4 months ago. The NCAA lost 9-0. without going into the details of the Alston case, it really created some antitrust exposure for the NCAA that made them feel like they were limited in their ability to set rules around NIL for 500,000 student athletes. And so here we are, at the point of June 15th or so, it became clear there was going to be no NCAA rules. There was going to be no federal bill. There were about 10 state bills that would start July 1st. So the NCAA created a waiver that allowed any school in any state that doesn't have a bill to set their own rules. So what we thought would happen in April of 2020 was we would have one set of rules for all the schools. Instead, we have hundreds of sets of rules. Every school has their own rules. And so when you hear it's the Wild West, Wild West, it is. And we'll get more into what that means. But that's really how we got here leading up to today. And so, I think Arizona is very, proactive and cutting edge, and even having an event like this. And I will tell you, a lot of athletic departments are in a wait and see mode, and it's hurting their coaches, especially with recruiting, let alone their student athletes.
That was awesome. Thank you. And I want to get back to you on kind of some of the things you're seeing, but I'd like to jump to Jason, who, if I'm not mistaken, may have benefited from the Ed O'Bannon case because it happened before he graduated. It happened after I did, so I did not benefit. Again, I'm not benefiting is the theme for me. But Jason benefited, I think. But more importantly, I'm just curious, Jason, what are you seeing out there right now in the market after hearing what Jim said? Here we are today.
Yeah, I just to touch on that, O'Bannon, I received a $160 check from when that case settled. Big win. For us as an agency and as marketing representatives, we were watching this thing unfold as everybody else was, and how does it impact our world? For us, it's a double-edged sword. We tend to have to develop relationships with college athletes to eventually represent them when they turn pro. And so we would constantly be networking and meeting them. But previously we could not have a actual professional relationship with them while they were in college. Now that we can, it's this giant, rush of athletes seeking us out for advice and representation, and not just 10, but thousands, looking for some sort of advice and an advisor behind them. And then us responding back of, we're not sure we can or want to represent 1,000 college athletes. The opportunities can be so varied, even for professional athletes in the marketing space. I can give you great examples of people like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or LeBron James, who are at the top of their group, that have unlimited off the court, off the field opportunities to use their name, image, and likeness as an endorsement or a personal appearance, or any other commercial endeavor. But for the other, let's call it 95%, it comes few and far between, even for those pro athletes. And college, our expectation was it was going to be no different. You have a lot more athletes in college than you do in the pros. You have far less media coverage. You have far less aggregation of that coverage. If you imagine most athletes, they're most relevant in their little ecosystem in city or on campus. And if you took someone from outside of that population, they probably don't know the athlete or are not following. It's very specific to whatever city or region or sport that you're in. So it's hard for a brand or other partner who wants to spend dollars in this to say, what is the value we're getting? They want reach, they want resonance, they want some return on that investment. And we understood that as experts in the space. So we weighed very carefully, and we still are. Jim and I actually for years talked about, what to do and when are we getting the one rule, and then we get the 100 rules, and then, it affects us as our ability to operate in it as well. So what we're, doing now is what we've always done. Look for good fits for us, elite performers, elite influencers, and trying to provide them very one-on-one specific services, and then watch and wait as it develops. I'm a former poli-sci major. I think it's a little appropriate to be in DC, have this almost federalism experiment going on where, you know, the NCAA said, hey, you guys figure it all out until we get one rule. And it allows for this giant experiment to go on. And I hope, you know, we all learn from it. At the same time, it's a great competitive advantage, I think, for the University of Arizona, being an alma mater, watching, you know, all of you up here talk about it, to be a first mover, to be trying to set that standard, to create a good set of rules for athletes, agents, all the actors who are involved to monetize and really maximize the experience.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you. That was awesome. I'm going to jump to Coach Lloyd here. You know, he mentioned that, I mentioned it last night, only 5% of NFL Major League players really have big time, you know, marketing deals. And we're probably seeing that same sort of thing in college as well, probably some similar numbers. We'll get to Jim here in a minute too, so I'd love to hear some of that. But I guess you've been in the business, you know, 20 years as a coach, now a head coach at U of A. What are just some of the things you're seeing on a day-to-day basis, Coach?
Well, I think first thing, I mean, I get it if you're not involved in the sports world like we are, that, you know, this might be a spooky thing. This is a great thing. And it's a theological thing, and things evolve over time. And, you know, we were talking last night, you know, I mean, the way I see it in my head, it's a very simple view. Olympic athletes back in the day used to not be able, they had to all be amateurs, you know, back in the day, and they couldn't get on the Wheaties box until they were done competing and turned professional. And that changed. You know, I don't know exactly what year, and it was in the 80s maybe, and that changed. Right. And then now it's the same evolution's happening in college athletics. So it's not like these student athletes, we're getting in bidding wars and we're out negotiating contracts with these. And that's a choice, you know, we've made as a program not to do. But the student athletes now have an opportunity to benefit if there is opportunities for them. Whereas before there was no opportunity and everything was so restrictive, and it just didn't make sense with, you know, the budget numbers you guys are seeing in athletic departments and these facilities and coaches' salaries. And then, you know, these student athletes are the engine driving it all, and they couldn't benefit. So I think it's a really good thing. And to me, it's only going to be a positive. We just kind of have to, it's going to take a little time to evolve and to become more efficient and to maximize it and make sure that these student athletes are, you know, have an opportunity to, you know, I guess, enhance their futures.
Yeah, no question. I totally agree with all of that. And I'm glad you said that. And that's a perfect segue to Sam Thomas, because what happens in these things is you have opportunities as a student athlete, and not every day you have an opportunity, but sometimes the perfect sort of storm comes together and you have these amazing opportunities. And last year or prior years, you were not able to capitalize that as a student athlete. Sam, I loved your story. Why don't you, if you could share it from last night, the opportunity you guys had last year and what that would have meant, I think this year is really interesting to me.
Yeah, so last year we made it to the national championship game. Not a lot of people expected us to be there. So just our story, just let alone, was insane. Everyone was following us, kind of supporting the underdogs. When we played UConn, who's a top women's program, and we actually were able to beat them. I mean, the whole world just went crazy, and it was a great experience. So just if we were able to have NIL back then, I think we would have had multiple opportunities, especially Ari, who got really known in the whole world. She was kind of only known in the West Coast, but then the East Coast, Midwest, South, everyone started knowing her. So if we had opportunities like that back, capitalizing on our run in the national championship, it would have been a great experience. After we beat UConn, we actually hopped on an interview with the Pac-12 network, and it was like filmed right off the iPhone. The bus lights were going crazy. We were playing music. Girls were talking. It was just raw and real. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a bad interview. Like, they're going to roast me on social media or something. But it was nice because they're like, this is the best interview we've ever done, because it was raw, real, right after we just beat UConn. It wasn't like set up. I had time to think about what I was going to say, and the whole team was able to jump in, say whatever they had to say. So it was just a great experience. So if we were able to have NIL opportunities like that, other businesses would be able to, you know, kind of have that same opportunity.
Yeah, that's awesome. And now you do. And that's what's going to be great. So when you go back there this year to the national title game, get ready for one of those other moments. And I think, you know, Jim, you're particularly involved in what she's talking about, these moments and, you know, being authentic and being able to sort of capitalize on those things. Talk about some of the things that you've seen actually already.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you know, what she's talking about is since, you know, 2017, we started Influencer well before NIL. We've always talked about be ready for the moment. we've seen it go the wrong way a lot with collegiate athletes, right? One story that I always go to is Villanova beats Michigan in the national championship a few years ago. I think it was 2018. And a gentleman came off the bench, scored 31 points, was the most outstanding player. First time that had ever happened in college athletics, or in March Madness, excuse me, where an MOP was a guy off the bench. And the next morning, that wasn't the story. The story was they found some tweets from 6 years ago that were racist and rap lyrics were being quoted. And like, we've seen those stories, and that's not being ready for the moment. So what does it look like to be ready for the moment? And that's what we've been trying to preach, is the do's, not the don'ts, to student athletes. And first off, your social media, whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, is your digital character footprint. In this room today, somebody's gone to somebody's social media page that they don't follow yet and judged who they are as a person based on their last 6 posts, what their statement is, what their picture is. That's just reality. When somebody makes it through a hiring process in my company, like, what do I do before I say, let's hire that person? I look at their social media. So we all use social media to judge character, and that is just the society we live in. And so having your social media built where it shows your whole story, where it shows how, who your family is, who your supporters are, who your mentors are, what you're into beyond the game, the fans, your teammates, all that stuff is part of being ready for the moment. And now in NIL, also part of being ready for the moment is having those links where the 2 groups of people who are now allowed to pay you can pay you, brands and fans. That's who can pay you now with NIL. So having a link for Cameo, so that when you make a big play, people are going to want it. More people are going to want to get you to do a cameo for them. Having a T-shirt store online so that people are going to want to buy your gear. Being signed up for platforms that can help you get endorsements, or having somebody helping you get endorsements, because all those things are going to come your way when you have a moment like Arizona women's basketball had, and you have to be ready for that. And you have to have those things set up. You're not going to be able to scramble and do it in the 2 hours after it happens. You got to be ready when it happens. And so I think that we're going to have, people always talk about the Jalen Suggs moment. What if after he makes that shot against Gonzaga, sorry, coach, or not, wasn't against Gonzaga.
I was on the good side of it.
Against UCLA, sorry. So you were on the good side of it. But when he makes that shot, you see him more recently come out with the NFTs. Like, that's something that after that moment is going to be the new story of NIL. We're going to see those things happen. We really haven't had enough of a season yet for that to happen. What we have seen is I'm going to give you an opposite example. We've seen a quarterback at Clemson do something with Dr. Pepper, right? And then come out the gate and lose the first big game to Georgia. And, it can go the other way. And so, it will be interesting. Everybody's saying, quarterbacks at those kinds of schools are going to make $1 million if they perform. Bryce at Alabama, Nick Saban said he's going to make towards $1 million. He didn't say he made $1 million. People took it and ran. But now that he's playing well, yeah, he will make. He's the quarterback at Alabama, right? So it's like, but there's an athletic performance aspect that still opens up all the opportunities. And then there's a branding initiative aspect. Athletic performance without branding initiative will limit the amount of opportunity you can realize. Branding initiative without athletic performance, unless you're a really creative social media influencer, will limit the opportunity you will realize. They go together. And the athletes who make the most are the ones who do both. Look at Tom Brady, look at LeBron. They hold their own phone half the time. They're putting out content all the time, letting you into their lives. So that's the opportunity now the athletes have to really be ready for the moment.
And I'm imagining, Coach Lloyd, every player you recruit thinks they're going to be LeBron by next year. So when you're recruiting these guys, what are you seeing on the recruiting trail? What's sort of happening in real life right now with this?
Well, I mean, how we've chosen to do it within our program is, we're not making name, image, and likeness like the centerpiece of the recruitment. The recruitment is still, what can we do for them as a student athlete? Here's how we're going to treat you on a daily basis. Here's how we played. Here's what the things we emphasize and value. And as a side piece to that, there's the name, image, and likeness. A lot of them are asking about. Because to me, I don't want to make this into where like everything's a transaction. I mean, to me, there's still a value in being a normal student athlete. And I'm just excited. On top of that, now there is some opportunities for them, and it is coming up in recruitments. And we've obviously explained our what we can do at the University of Arizona for them, and we think we're well positioned in it. But we also always throw in, this isn't the main part of the recruitment.
Sure.
And we want to make sure on that, because at the end of the day, I think you hit it on the nail on the head. I mean, athletic performance and how you are as a person is still going to drive your ability to get deals and to make money off your name, image, and likeness. And I always tell guys, like, all our guys want to play in the NBA. And, if you make the NBA, and then Jason can tell you more about this stuff, but like, you make it, you think you make a lot of money. And even those guys, their first few years aren't making like totally life-changing money. Now they get to their second contracts, they can start. That's where you see these $100 million figures and $20 million a season. That's the goal. I mean, if you want wealth, that's the direction you got to go. I mean, and these guys will get more into the specifics of what do these current deals look like right now, and you guys' minds are probably going to be blown, and you might scoff a little bit because they're really small. A lot of them are, and the average deal. I mean, I'll let these guys get into the numbers. That's their job. But so to me, I always want to put the focus on here's where we're trying to go, and the great thing is while we're going there are going to be some benefits you can do. But it's something that comes up every recruitment. You got to be prepared for it. And if you're not, I mean, as a coach, I tell everybody you better go coach high school, because this thing's real and it's not changing, and it's a good thing. And two, the players, I mean, most of them, you just have to be honest with them. You're not going to get like wealthy from this,
Yeah. No, I think that's a great approach and the right one. I'm curious, hearing that, Sam, what do you sort of hear in the locker room, and how are your teammates talking about this, and what's sort of going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, he was saying, like, no one, or at least for us, is making $1 million or having a company pay their whole rent. It's more like little like gas money or grocery money, stuff like that, which is still very nice to have. I'm glad that we have this, but it's not like they're not going crazy. Their phones are ringing off the line. Like, we have to reach out to some companies. We have to, and it's like promo codes, like use my promo code, get this % off. It's nothing like that's insane. Like, there's a time and a place, kind of like we were talking about capitalizing on your moment. Like, if we make the national championship game, then yes, there might be some better deals coming in. But right now we're in the off season. We just came off, we have like a couple months of rest. The national championship game is still amazing, but it's kind of dying down a little bit. So there's not going to be thousands of companies running to us. We have to reach out to them. But I mean, everyone's really enjoying the process and loving the moment.
Jason, I'm going to let you talk about this. You said something really cool last night about the fourth leg of the stool of the student athlete. And I'm curious if you kind of talk about that to the group, and then how you see that leg, really going forward, especially in your business.
Yeah, we were just reminiscing about the pitch as a student athlete in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, pre this, and it was definitely athletics, academics, and then you phrased it well with social, becoming a grown person on campus around all these experiences. But now I think, the pitch for athletic departments is going to have to include that fourth leg of the stool, where they're developing a story around that athlete and a narrative and a brand, and helping them become entrepreneurs and helping them expose themselves to really good commercial opportunities. Why do I think that falls on potentially schools and athletic departments? Agents, marketing representatives, family members, they can only service so many of these athletes. And one of the most magical things I think about college athletics is you don't know who's going to become that star most of the time. Yes, there's the high recruits. You take a Zion Williamson, everybody saw that through Duke, and major social media following, second coming of the superstar. That's an obvious one. But a lot of times in college sports, it's just a great heroic performance through March Madness or through college football or through a lot of the Olympic sports that, as Jim mentioned, Tommy mentioned, Sam mentioned, you can't miss those tentpole moments. Well, who's preparing the 95% of these college athletes for that? Who's teaching them how to use their social media? Who's teaching them how to create a logo? Who's teaching them how to put themselves out there, how to be a public speaker? And a lot of that is going to come through, Arizona's Edge program, I think, for this university, and other universities are going to have to figure it out for themselves. For us as an agent and as a marketing representative, it's very normal for us to see a cyclical nature to the spend from brands on these tentpole moments. Yes, Alabama quarterback on national TV during college football, time period every week, is getting interviewed, is getting aggregated on ESPN.com, is getting mentioned every single time they celebrate a touchdown. As a brand, that's valuable. You want to be associated with that as much as possible. But when college football season is over, that will likely dissipate. They'll turn pro and become a pro aspect of it. For most college sports, it's going to go through their season. For Sam, there's not a lot of tension on women's basketball right now. As she mentioned, as they hopefully make another run through the tournament and ultimately the Final Four, the attention will shift and brands will focus. But if she hadn't prepared her social media accounts, if she hadn't gotten her creative assets, photos, other sort of production things that she did earlier, if she doesn't have a logo, if she's never told her story about who she is and what things she likes to have in her life from a brand standpoint, from an authenticity standpoint, people can't find you like that quick. They don't know how much to spend. They don't know why they would be associated with you. They don't know why their consumers would be associated with you. So it's this process that we do for normally the professional athletes that starts from day one when we meet them to create that brand plan, the resources around it, the storytelling that needs to permeate college sports for them to have that moment and that opportunity and not miss it. And it's really, it is sad to think about. We represent a woman named Caitlin Ohashi, who was a UCLA gymnast, had this great viral moment of a perfect 10 performance, and she couldn't capitalize in the moment. That to me is what NIL represents the most, is athletes who aren't going to be able to turn pro and make $100 million on a contract, but still had a really great opportunity in college to showcase the university themselves, their story, and monetize it. We were taking that away from them previously, and now hopefully they'll be prepared. They'll be able to leave college with both some gas money and potentially some money to start a business or do other things around their life.
Yeah. Well, I think to me, like what I'm hearing and what's great about this, and you mentioned it, Coach Lloyd, was just, this is fun. I mean, this is awesome. This is an awesome thing that's happening. And we haven't seen anything like terror. Like, so there were some people thinking, oh no, if this happens, all of a sudden Division I is going to become Division III, and people are going to be going pro, and the whole sort of system's going to fall apart. You mentioned, track and field system didn't fall apart; it was fine. Everything kept moving. And for me, I was thinking about, you mentioned Caitlin, Jason. I think I've got two daughters, as I mentioned, and I think some of the opportunities for women's sports, especially, is incredible. That has not been there. We're talking to Sam about this, and Caitlin, what she could do, but I think it's even more than the money. It's just the opportunities. Here's Sam in Washington, D.C., speaking to this incredible audience, and what kind of an experience that is. And before, students didn't have that opportunity. So now to think through, and I think the EDGE program, gives student athletes resources and ability to sort of understand how to start a business, what your name and image and likeness is, how to think entrepreneurial about things like that. Jim, where do you think where's kind of the next thing going when we look forward, like in the next year or two? What are you sort of seeing in terms of how this thing's going to play out?
Well, I think, first off, the reason that the federal government isn't necessarily scrambling to set a federal law, there's two reasons. One is it's not high up on the list compared to some very important things going on in our country. But also, I think people want to see how the behaviors and the data tell the story of what the national uniform regulations really need to be. And it's kind of like the Wild West will show a lot of things, right? You'll see people and do great things with this, and there are a lot of great stories, but you will also see people manipulate this system for recruiting purposes. I joke with our team, our whole focus was folks in Brent's seat, compliance, for the first half of this year. We wanted to make sure we built all the product features on top of our core product to serve compliance and help student athletes be better educated about what they need to know with NIL and have a place to report all their transactions. Well, it's shifted. Compliance is not necessarily, if I'm speaking generally, driving the conversation now that July 1st has happened. Coaches are, because coaches are seeing some recruits say things and sometimes even decommit or not commit at all because another school has promised them something. And so that is a reality of the future, to answer your question, that I'm not going to dance around. because I have a lens with, a couple hundred schools where I'm seeing all kinds of stuff. And I think that, everybody, I think, would talk about probably the Memphis situation. So Memphis signed 2 top 5 players, and supposedly there's a FedEx deal. FedEx is based in Memphis. It's worth 7 figures, and those players are going to have that deal in an endorsement form. And then the question is, well, how involved was Memphis? And then it's gotten kind of quiet because there's 10 other stories like it. BYU just got all of their walk-on scholarships. Well, now SEC baseball schools are saying, well, we've only been dividing 11 scholarships amongst 25 guys for the last few years. We haven't even had a guy with a full scholarship on our baseball team. And schools like Ole Miss are profitable in baseball. So they're like, let's go raise the money and give our baseball players full scholarships. Like, this is where this is going. So there is a reality there. I don't want to, make it all just rosy, because it is great for the student athletes, but that will get quiet, like that Memphis situation, until Memphis goes to the Final Four. Then it's going to come back up again, right? Kind of like everybody thought Cam Newton might have taken some cash, but then when he won the Heisman and they won the national championship, it all came back, right? Like Reggie Bush. You could all look at these stories. This is now bringing that type of stuff above board, because the NIL deals are not hush-hush. They're out there. And so I think it's just going to be interesting to see how we have a uniform set of rules, whether it's conference rules, which seems to be tough because states have laws, and then the conference commissioner would have to lobby to get states on the same page, whether it's a federal bill, and that's going to be an important part of the future. The other part of the future is student athletes are not going to dream to play pro sports forever and then get to a point where they don't realize that dream, and they look at their former classmates 5-10 years after college, and they're like, those folks all have a head start on me. Now they're going to actually be hopefully staying with those student-only students, because they're, as student athletes, able to think beyond the game and do some of these things. And that's my hope, is that student athletes will actually be forced to think about the bigger picture of life, and how this moment where Sam can be here is part of a lot of moments that sports created for her to set the stage for the rest of her life.
Yeah. And this is obviously such a big topic, but Coach, you still have a basketball season and a team and practice. How do you sort of implement this and give them the opportunities, but at the same time keep it in focus on some of the other things they're there for?
Well, I mean, to me, it's no different than what a professional athlete would do. I mean, if you have practice, you go to practice. You have to do all your extracurriculars on your own time. And, and we have a built-in day or 2 off a week, and hopefully they would be able to do it then. But I don't know how much time we have, but I want to make sure we touch on, I mean, there's one group of student athletes who is on the outside looking in on this. That's internationals. All these international student athletes right now, and this is the place to talk about it, DC, they're at the university on F1 student visas. They have these I-20s, and as part of that, they're not able to earn outside income. And so, what are we going to do? And that is, I mean, we have 8 international players at Arizona, and good players. So what does it look like for them going forward? How do we, get these, this whatever fixed? Or, I mean, I don't know all the right political terms. I mean, Jason's better than I am, but that type of stuff. But what are we going to do to address that? Because I mean, they should be able to have the same student athlete experience as an American. I mean, in my opinion, and hopefully, that's something that can be resolved. And I don't know what's being done. If you're hearing anything, or
Jason, is that something that you guys have heard about much or deal with much?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to work with a lot of international athletes in my career, and it's definitely a daily conversation for a very large subset of the NCAA student athlete population. And they're not getting any advice, and that's what's coming back to. They're not getting any clarity from the immigration, who generally can issue guidance. At least they don't have to pass a law, or they can actually tell a certain population who's trying to go through the immigration process that we will not enforce this, or you can do this, or you can do that, without having a formal law on the books. And they're not doing that. And so you have thousands, I think, student athletes at this point who are curious why their teammate can potentially do an NIL deal and they cannot, or they can't, without checking 3 or 4 different other boxes, and usually get the answer no. I don't know of another solution to that other than through the federal government. So that's probably where it's going to need to be, barring some risk takers. There could be a student athlete who's international on F1 who decides to push the envelope and just says, you know what, I'm going to do it, and we'll see if they enforce it. And when they do, I'll sue them. And there'll be plenty of advocates out there who will want to help in that case, but it's a risky one. You could lose your status, lose your scholarship. Who's willing to do that?
Sam, you I think have a number of international players on your team. What has that come up at all, or have they talked about that much?
Yeah, well, actually, we had a SAC meeting before coming to this, and all the internationals spoke up and said, Sam, we want you to speak about this on our behalf. So, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, so if someone who has like personally like played with foreigners, I mean, I think they deserve the same opportunities as Americans. Obviously, it's hard. I mean, they get taxed on their stipends. They have that issue. They're traveling all the way from across the country. Some of them have never been to America. Some of them barely speak English. They have so many already struggles on top of it. I'm not saying giving them NIL will solve all their problems, but it gives them just something that they can look forward to, have fun with. I mean, I know our internationals come here and they're not bringing their cars. They're kind of like left alone a little bit, and we can only help so much as coaches and teammates. So I think just giving them this opportunity is just something to like help spark their interest or like get them uplifted. It usually takes about a year to have them like get comfortable, know the area a little bit, learn a little bit more English. So I think having that NIL opportunity will open up a lot of windows, and it's a great story to have it international. Like, what's it like being an international? There's so many stories and opportunities that you can lead with that.
Jim, you're a student athlete. If you were right now, you're a freshman student athlete, what would you be, and you know all the stuff you know now, especially in the marketing and the areas, how would you sort of approach it as a student athlete? Like, what would sort of be 1, 2, and 3 in your mind to deal with this, not to get sidetracked, but to take advantage of it?
So I think, first of all, it starts with the stuff that doesn't directly lead to making money, which goes into brand building. So we've talked about it a lot, but having a story that I'm out there telling on social media that goes beyond me as an athlete, but still leverages the inside the lines story. So to keep it simple, we always preach there's your inside the lines content and there's your outside the lines content. Just telling your story of your workouts and practices and games and the moments and the teammates and the fans is great. But what about what makes you tick outside of that? Everybody's got something they're passionate about. For me, it was broadcasting, actually. I was a broadcast journalism major, and while I played baseball, I broadcasted all the basketball games. And so, every young student has hopefully some sort of passion like that. We've seen athletes tie themselves to esports and video games. We've seen them tie themselves to dancing, to music, to all these different things. So I would make sure my story is being told often in a very holistic manner. The second thing I would do is I would go to every alumni meetup, every offline event possible, and meet people like this. Shake hands, look them in the eye, create a relationship, exchange contact info, make sure that I was, once again, using the uniform while I was wearing it. Online, I would be, connecting with people through my social media. If they're not following me, I would be going and pursuing them and direct messaging them and creating relationships that way. Student athletes in general have such a big opportunity on LinkedIn because no athletes are on there. So the ones who are stick out. And I was just at Penn State last weekend with Jesse Lucetta, who's a star linebacker there, and he's crushing it on LinkedIn. And he's probably going to get a realistic NFL opportunity, but he's thinking about, like, right now, how he can use sports content and some of the stuff he's passionate about with music and business to create relationships. And he ended up getting Meek Mill, who's a big rapper, getting Meek Mill's manager's attention, getting Meek Mill to come to the game against Auburn this past weekend, all by himself using LinkedIn. So, like, while you have the jersey, you got to use it. And so I would be thinking that way. And I also think because NIL's new, unfortunately, there's too many of these panels without athletes. The thing that's great about this panel today, no offense to Coach and Jason, and it's Sam's here. Like, that's what we want to hear from, right? And so athletes right now have an opportunity to be a thought leader in NIL, to tell us what it's like to be them through their social media. I always tell athletes, I'm like, listen, ESPN will spend $7 figures to be at Arizona to get behind the scenes. You can do it with your phone. Use it while you can and tell your story and let people in.
Well, perfect segue to Sam. And so, Sam, we were talking last night. I think it's interesting just how you've been, using the Edge program, some of the things you've been doing. I think everybody would love to hear just some of the things you've gone through the last sort of 6 months or so to sort of set yourself up for some of these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of things like in the works that I'm thinking of, but again, I'm waiting for like my major moment, like when basketball season starts, all the hypes around that. I recently did something with Sam's Club. They did a competition. Your name had to be Sam, and you just had to say why would you sponsor me. So I filmed a little video. I hit like a half court behind the back shot. So we're waiting back to hear. The competition ends on the 29th, so we'll see about that. But just little things like that. The winner gets $10,000. So we'll see. They're picking 6 people. But just doing stuff like that. And then with ArizonaEdge, it helps a lot because they give me opportunities, and it's like a platform. They're not telling me you have to do this or you have to do this because it's all on me. So it's nice just to have that. They're helping me with like photo shoots, videos, to have like a professional look, because a lot of athletes, you know, it's just they're always in their uniform, which is great. But at some point you need to like be professional. You have to have like some type of professional things out there. So just having the ArizonaEdge supporting me and just knowing that they do like NIL, and it's not like they're like, no, you can't do this, you can't do this. They're just trying to bring in all the opportunities as much as possible. So that really makes me feel comfortable as a student athlete.
How many half-court shots did you have to try before you made it?
Exactly. Yeah. We're going to go with that. We're going to go with 1-on-1. So ignore all the balls on the floor in the video. Just 1-on-1.
Well, coaches and announcers love to use this cliche, the glue guy or glue person. And Sam is absolutely the glue person of the U of A. I'm thinking a glue endorsement, some glue company around glue. You know, we can make that happen. Like, let's get that going.
I like that.
Well, we have about 10 minutes or so before we have in the Q&A. Before that, you want to ask a question now? Go ahead. Well, he can ask a question. Yes. Let's see. Do we? Yeah, I can repeat. We have a microphone.
So I'm struck in this discussion that on both ends of this panel, we have 2 former U of A athletes who went on to law school. So I know that Sam, I said, wow, you know, how did you get out here? She goes, graduate school. I only have classes on Monday. And your dean is actually here.
Yes.
Because you're getting a master's in educational leadership from our incredible College of Education. I go back and I think about Eric Heiden. Eric Heiden had a lot of medals from the Olympics, and he didn't get to, but he went on to be a Stanford medical student, and he's a very successful orthopedic surgeon. I'd love to hear a discussion about, let's stick with why they came to the University of Arizona in the first place. I understand it's for athletics, but to get a degree, to do the work, because I'm kind of concerned they're going to be in their off time. They're not going to be studying. They're going to be thinking about NIL deals. The fundamental still, education is the big force multiplier in one's life. And getting a good education, wherever it is, I think is really, really important. So I'd love to hear some reaction to that.
Yeah, perfect. Let's start with Jason. Yeah.
Yes, and I would say why even getting that education, University of Arizona. I used to, when I was in college, I used to give this speech about go west when my family, you know, told me to go west to find opportunity, and Arizona always represented that for me. I was actually born in Tucson, grew up in Oklahoma. Both my parents are U of A grads, and I think the opportunity that you have both as a student and as a student athlete when you come there is there for the taking. It's a platform. The university is a sports sort of affiliated platform, but it's also very unique in that all the different genres of education you can seek out. You mentioned College of Education, but obviously there's science, there's the business school, there's so many opportunities there, and there's a lot of freedom. It's different than other parts of the country where you're forced into, let's say, investment banker. There's just sort of this historical element of what people go do. You move to New York, you do. The freedom I think you get on the West Coast, and specifically with the U of A, to try different things, become great at what you want, while experiencing that platform of sport. It's hard to recreate. And maybe there's 20 schools in the entire country that have that great mix of education and athletics that benefits their student athlete population. Arizona's right there in that group. For me, I knew I wasn't going to be able to be talented enough to play professional sports while I was there. And that was never something that I thought about, dreamed about. I always knew I was going there to do this, this, and this, go on to law school and do something else with my life. And the university embraced that, the athletic program embraced that. And ultimately, it has given me a lot of benefits in my life, professionally and personally, including being on this panel today.
That's awesome. Sam, what was your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy because there's only going to be like one best person on the team. And so I played behind the 3rd round draft pick, so probably wasn't going to be me. And so I think people have to realize it is about your athletic ability and how great you do, but it's also about being a person and personable. Like the fans are going to be the ones helping you with everything. So, I mean, I came in my freshman year, I was quiet, I didn't do much academically, and then I got a 4.0. And was like, oh, you got a 4.0? And then so Sophia from Life Skills started introducing me to a bunch of different clubs and SAC, PAL. I did a Nike internship and all that stuff. People just started recognizing more. So honestly, like, yes, my athletic abilities helped, and we went to the WNIT, but also academically, that's where like people like, oh, you guys, like my dean, like now everyone is starting to like know me a little bit more through like my academics and what I do off the court more than per se of what I do on the court.
So my quick story was I grew up in the Bay Area, and I always wanted to go to Stanford and play basketball. That was my dream of all dreams. And then when I was a junior and I had a chance to go to Stanford, I was also getting recruited by University of Arizona. And when I looked at both schools, and it's funny because we were talking about the Stools last night, Jason. I mean, I was a basketball player at the time, but academics was something I knew that at some point I was going to be done playing basketball, and I was a good student. And so I looked at both schools, and I honestly thought, I was going to get the best experience combined at the University of Arizona from a basketball, academic, and social life. And I just felt it was the best school for me to go to. Lute had a lot to do with it for sure, but I loved the community of Tucson. I loved everything about it. I still have a lot of people say, why didn't you go to Stanford? You're crazy. But I made the right decision. And to both of what Sam and Jason were saying, I mean, I just thought that the combination of all those things, I felt I could get everything I needed to academically out of Arizona that I wanted and that I was searching for. But at the same time, I felt like we could also win a national championship in basketball. And the third one was the social aspect. I really liked the social aspect of Arizona, big school and so forth. So that was mine. Coach, anything you want to touch on before we hit the Q&A?
Well, I would just say, Bobby, a lot of it, I think, is how you're going to approach it as a coach and what you make the most important. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's still about being a student athlete. It's still about that experience as number one. This is just something a little extra. I mean, and maybe a big thing should be made out about it. But I think the one thing we haven't covered here, and it might be eye-opening for you guys a little bit, like Jim can probably tell you, what is the average deals that are happening out there right now? And so for us in our program, we're selling the normal things we'd be selling: student life experience, the development as a basketball player, and hopefully having a professional career on that, all while taking care of your education and making sure you're set up for the future. I mean, we haven't turned to like this, say, okay, now we're going to start, selling this dream on you kids coming in here making millions of dollars on endorsements, because that's not reality. And so our approach hasn't changed. This is just like the icing on top of the cake, the NIL stuff. And I think these NIL stats, you probably hear, you're probably like, oh, we've been talking about all this for that. I think you might be surprised.
Well, and before I get into the stats, just from my perspective, going from New York down to a small college in Alabama to chase my dream playing baseball, there is a huge advantage of going to a school like the University of Arizona. And it's, while the professors are probably amazing and the books are great and all that stuff, it's the alumni network and it's the people you get to meet, right? And so, the reality is these are all levers: sports, academics, NIL. And while you need to prioritize academics first, a lot of people have degrees. So how you approach getting yourself out there and meeting people, we've all heard, it's not what it's who is very important. So the goal would be not that NIL would be more important than academics, but it would teach behaviors that especially student athletes who are busy might not think they need to learn right now, but actually by learning them, by getting themselves out there, there's probably a lot of students you could talk about who have done great in their field, but there's also probably a lot of students who got the same grades, but didn't get the same opportunities. This is about creating more opportunities for yourself from this university that has such a prestigious reputation. And that's at least my hope for NIL, because when you look at the numbers, it's not a business that you're going to live on. There's 500,000 student athletes. And, if I was to sum up NIL, I'd say 499,000 of them will make 4 figures of revenue with their NIL, $2,500 a year on average. And 1,000 of those 500,000 will make 5 figures, more than $10,000. And 100 of them will make 6 figures, and 10 of them will make 7 figures. Like, that's the market. And if you add all that up, a lot of people get excited because they're like, that's a multi-$100 million market, maybe even $1 billion market. Well, yeah, in total, but look at the per athlete value, and keep in mind, each athlete is her own business. Those aren't big businesses. Those are extra revenue streams. So just what we've seen in 2 months and 22 days. We've seen more than 300,000 transactions come through our system. Now, there's 2 ways we see transactions, either through partners we have that the student athletes sign up with and transact with. I gave an example earlier of Cameo. We have got about 30 of those partners that are platforms they can use to make money. We also see these transactions through student athletes manually entering the data around a transaction that might happen through a local business or somebody who's contacted them directly. So this is from just actually the first 2 months. This doesn't include September, but more than 3,000 transactions have been reported. Now, one caveat there is a lot of schools require reporting up front. And so it might be, hey, I'm going to sell T-shirts. They report that, but we don't know how many they sold. And it's not being reported every time they sell one after that. So there is a little bit of deflation here with these numbers on that respect. But at Power 5 schools, it's been around 10% of all student athletes per campus have said they've had some sort of NIL activity, which I think is impressive in 60 days. The average transaction is $1,049, but that is inflated by a guy like Spencer Rattler, the quarterback at Oklahoma, reporting a 6-figure transaction, right? So, you couple that with a $20 transaction, and that's how you get down to $1,049. The median transaction is $51. Now, that's up from month 1. The median transaction in the first month from student athletes was $25. Because, one thing that went rampant with NIL, and is a big part of this, is Barstool gave free T-shirts to any athlete who wanted to put on their Instagram profile that they were a Barstool athlete, right? And it also, that broke a lot of rules because student athletes were then using a picture of themselves. I don't know if they did it in Arizona, but in their uniform with the mark on, saying, I'm a Barstool athlete. And a lot of student athletes got in trouble for that because that's against most schools' rules because they can't use the marks to promote a company. But, they got to report that T-shirt. And out of these transactions, more than 50% are in kind. So it's not cash. It's a free meal at a local restaurant. It's a portion of their rent being paid to promote the apartment complex. It's, the T-shirt or gear or something being given to them. And they're supposed to report that and actually pay taxes on that, which is a whole other story we won't get into. But the awareness of reporting that is something that a lot of student athletes still don't understand. So a lot of in-kind stuff probably isn't even being reported. The percentage of activity coming from football, men's and women's basketball is 42%. So the revenue sports are 42%. The other sports represent, almost 60%. And then the percent that are women is 28%, and the percent that are men is 72%. So just, a little picture from the first 2 months of what we're seeing from our couple hundred D1 schools and more than 100,000 student athletes. And I think, it will evolve, but what student athletes will realize is they'll see peers do some things that are creative and make money or make money off of playing well, and they'll want to learn more, right? This is just like getting a personal record in the deadlift of 500 pounds or getting playing time or being the best player on your team. As she said, there's only one best player on the team, or getting a 4.0. You get out what you put in. And so the unfortunate part of this is student athletes didn't know that. And the reason they didn't know that is because the media wrote about this to fans and student athletes in a way that portrayed this as a big payday for student athletes, mainly because they were using Zion Williamson in every article. And so student athletes woke up on July 1st and thought, my life's going to change. Some money's going to show up in my checking account. And you know how they proved it? Tens of thousands of student athletes posted the same post on July 1st, a Notes app screenshot from somebody's phone, which was a paragraph written saying, today the NCAA is allowing me to make money off of my name, image, and likeness. And so for all those local, regional, and national businesses out there, I want you to know my DMs are open for business. DM me. And then what happened? This happened. So I talk to student athletes about this a lot. I'm fortunate in my role as influencer to be around SAMs all the time. And that's who I learn the most from. And I want to help them realize you get out what you put in and how, yeah, you can make some money, but this could actually set the stage for what's next. And I think as people in higher education, that's what we already care about anyways, right? Like, what's our mission, no matter what we do? To maximize the potential of the student, in this case, the student athlete. This is another way we can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes to President Robbins' comment, which is just as a student athlete, this is just another way that, I mean, it's just, you're going to learn so much. Sam's already probably learned more than she could learn in a lot of classes just because it's real life things. So we have about 10 minutes or so. And we want to open it up for any questions. Go ahead.
Hey, Andy Ruge, George Washington. Justin Kier, I was at George Mason for a long time, so Justin's a buddy of mine. And I see he's a great, warm young man. I love him. I see him all the time. He's got a logo. He's doing T-shirts. He's doing Cameo. But maybe this is more for Jim or what you guys have seen. What category is getting utilized the most? Is it coaching? I know Coach Up is a deal where you can do training. What is the thing you're seeing that non-basketball, maybe non-football people are getting financially rewarded with?
I think actually merch is something that everybody's trying to lean into. And, you know, the problem with that is it's kind of like you're a stock. And if you play well and do some things well on the floor, especially if you have that Arizona women's basketball moment, you'll sell a lot of shirts. So I don't think it's a bad thing to have it put together. And there's companies that will, you know, do all the fulfillment and house the stuff and give you a shopping cart link and you put it on your bio. And, you know, so a lot of athletes are doing that. A lot of athletes are doing logos too, but they all are just following the same, you know, pattern as Tom Brady, right? It's like their two initials and the number. You know, and so I think merch is a big one. You know, I can tell you a lot of like creative things I'm seeing, like athletes charging for interviews for the first time. And I think that's going to become more and more of a thing, especially because there's usually a publication that's tied to covering the school that's not affiliated with the school that wants to pay the athlete because it helps them make some money by just doing an appearance. Autographs have been big, you know, so because autographs is such a local thing, you can show up, go to, you know, a coach's show and then do an autograph signing after and have a per signature amount already negotiated. And if you're big enough, like the trading card companies will get involved and create a card for you and do the deal with you. And so I'm seeing a bunch of that. So those are just some examples.
The two most that we see for the athletes we're representing is trading card collectible memorabilia. So that space, which is, you know, related to autographs, and then branded content. So anytime I can put a brand logo or something in your social media space, those are by far the most that we get.
Yeah.
I will. Amazing person.
Hi, I'm Nick Preventis with the University of Arizona, and you guys touched on this a little bit about how this kind of adds a whole new wrinkle to the sales pitch you make a recruit. So I'm just curious what kind of advice you would give a high school, junior, maybe sophomore, maybe even younger as they kind of navigate this whole NIL landscape.
I mean, the first advice I'd give them is focused on being great at basketball and having great character and being a great person. Because, I mean, you know, that is going to give you the greatest ability to make money over the long term. And so that's where we focus. You know, the next thing, you know, we always talk about is, you know, it's the old coaching adage, you know, individual accolades come after team accolades. So you need to be on a great team. And the better team you're on, the more marketable we're all going to be. And so, those are the things that we focus on. And to be honest, our approach hasn't changed. I mean, the first thing I wrote down, this name, image, and likeness thing went down because you are figuring out your recruiting pitch. Now that we can do name, image, and likeness, players aren't all of a sudden better. Coaches don't coach better. The moment players don't play or something goes wrong, they're still not going to be happy even if they get a little bit of money. So really nothing's changed. And I believe the schools that had the greatest advantage before name, image, and likeness, if they harness this right, they're going to still have the greatest advantages when it comes to recruiting in name, image, and likeness. So to be honest with you, our approach really hasn't changed, and we haven't tried to shift this to we're going to make you a money-making entity, because I think that's about the wrong things when you're 17, 18, 19 years old.
Hi, Julia Smith with the Federal Relations Office for the University of Arizona. I have two questions. The first one is, Sam, are you on LinkedIn?
Yes,
Okay.
I am on LinkedIn.
Everyone, after this, please get your phones out and connect with Sam on LinkedIn. And the second is, my team and I have been working with Congress for many months, years now, on NIL, and I'm curious from your perspectives. President Robbins started talking about immigration related to an event we had last night. There's an immigration connection with our international students with NIL, so it's a big issue for us. That's something we've been advocating for. I'm curious from you all, what you would like to see in federal legislation, or even just the federal legislation to actually happen. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, for me, I've recruited international players my whole career, and a lot of really good ones that I just don't see any reason why they should be penalized because they're from a different country and they're here on a student visa. I think whatever was written in the student visa regulations, this was never considered a possibility. And so to me, it's just a logical thing. Like, why are we limiting internationals? There's no reason. To me, I would just like to see them be treated exactly like the American students. That would be a win for us.
Yeah, that, and then, also, I think that it's going to be interesting to see which student athletes do push the envelope, to Jason's point earlier, because they are allowed to make money with businesses back home. But the question is, can they make money with businesses back home when they're here? And the answer, I think, is no. But what if they do the deal while they're back home, but they post something while there's a lot of gray area? And I think pushing the envelope is going to hopefully expose this enough where it becomes something that at the federal level they're interested in addressing. Because if you did separate it and create a student athlete visa, well, then you're limiting the students who have a visa from doing some things too, and that's not fair. So it really just, the whole thing needs to be looked at. But it probably, I think it will come from some student athletes actually pushing the envelope and calling them out, and maybe even getting in trouble, but people paying attention to it and becoming what it needs to become, which is top of mind.
Jason, do you have any thought on that?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth from Congressman Anthony Gonzalez's office, actually. So I spoke to Jim a number of times before about this issue, and this is an issue. For those of you who don't know my boss, he was a Ohio State wide receiver and then a former NFL player. So this is an issue he cares a lot about, and has been really working in Congress to educate Congress about this issue. So I guess my question is, a lot of the pushback we still get on NIL is about pay to play specifically. And I think there's just a real concern about inducements and boosters and things like that in this space. So Coach Light, I know you talked a little bit about this, but would love to hear your thoughts on that and how to kind of push back on that narrative. I think my boss's perspective is kind of the same as yours, that, you know, the big Ohio States, University of Arizona, they're still going to have that brand power to recruit no matter what. So curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think what makes it interesting is that, you know, your local and state governments have so much influence on this, and we're all not playing, honestly, on a level playing field. And so that's what makes it interesting. And my job isn't to make the rules. My job is just to play within them and create advantageous situations. And Brent's been an amazing resource for me. And if you guys don't know, we keep mentioning Brent. Brent should be up here on the panel. He's easily the most knowledgeable, maybe besides here, of what's going on in this space. It's tough, like when you're an old school coach, I've been doing it 20 years and you come up in this one model, like where everything's amateur and they get an education, they're getting this. And I just woke up one day and you're like, oh, this is crazy. But you're like, you know what? We've got to change too. And we've got to do what's right for the student athletes. And those inducements you're talking about right there, those are happening with or without name, image, and likeness. So, I just think I can't be an old fuddy-duddy. We got to get with the times and we got to do what's right for the program and for the student athletes. And those things that you're talking about are going to happen whether or not, students get name, image, and likeness. So why should we punish them for something that's been happening in college athletics for a number of years where there have been recruiting inducements by certain schools and stuff like that? So for me, there's not a perfect solution to your question, but it's about moving forward and what's doing best for the greater good, and that's allowing these student athletes to benefit off their name, image, and likeness.
Yeah, the reality is that the economic model of big time college athletics is changing, and it's going to fall on the athletic director and leadership to understand that, because if you have a $150 million capital campaign that the development office in athletics is leading, and they're doing it because they want to build a brand new facility that's going to be used to get recruits, you have to realize that now you might have to be okay with, some of those donors who have businesses taking their money elsewhere and going directly to the student athlete for the same purpose. And that's just the reality. Same thing with your MMR, that, your multimedia rights holder who's helping sell local and national advertising. They need to actually be rallied in this and saying to those companies, hey, we want you to obviously keep buying signage inventory in the McHale Center, and we want you to keep, doing TV, radio advertising. But also, if you want to work with our student athletes, here's how you do that. And they got to be secure in doing that. It's just like, if you don't do that, the student athletes at your university are going to miss out on some of the opportunities that universities who do that are going to create for student athletes indirectly, and that's where the rub is how direct and indirect is that. But that's where I'm seeing, without going into like too much detail, that's what I'm seeing some schools do that are leaning into this. And anybody that thought this was going to be some sort of level playing field, to go back to what everyone said, it's just nothing's a level. Kent State and Alabama don't have the same weight room. It's just the reality of college sports.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Sam, you said something. I'm Reed Skaggs from Lewisburg. I work with Julia. We work for the research office here. You said something that hit me. I have a daughter close to your age. Was your internship paid at Nike?
Yes, it was.
Does this, so this question goes to you, does this open the opportunity for most of the athletes who won't go to the pros to go get paid internships and have the opportunities to work in places that they're studying or trying to understand better, so they're getting a foot in the door that they might not, you guys are exceptions to the rule, that you drove yourself through schools. But if you didn't, I would think a lot of people would want the opportunity to get an internship or a job while they're a student, so they're prepared for the workforce. Is that a fair statement to say this could help?
Yeah.
I think.
Look, my wife was a gymnast at U of A, and she did that same Nike internship. And without that, she wouldn't have gotten into sports marketing, as a result of it. I think Sam doing that internship, getting a master's, being on this panel, her network is going to expand tenfold as a result. And I guarantee you're going to get professional opportunities as a result of it. Previously they were allowed to do athletes are allowed to do internships prior to NIL, but I do think that this allows them to market themselves to employers in a totally different way that they weren't allowed to before in the preparation for NIL, meaning getting on LinkedIn, telling a story, having professional assets, all these things you've mentioned. They're going to be ahead of the student athlete population at large because they're already on a very specific platform with that sports, academics, NIL mix, that it's easier to find them. when you see a Sam as an employer, us included, these are who we want to hire. Why? Because they're high performers, they're professional, they're educated, they have that athletic background, so they understand competition. We are going to hire that over just any general student population person, even if the resumes look the same. So to me, yes, it's just, once again, putting themselves out there a little bit more than they have ever been able to do.
One more question, Dr. Robbins?
Yeah. Sorry. Lori told me to stand. So this is not a question, it's just a comment. I really appreciate you all making the time to be here and all of you staying. This is probably the least session that people were going out and getting refreshments. But I want to come back to the value of a world-class education at a place like the University of Arizona or Stanford or Harvard or wherever you want to say. I think we can't overlook that because the statistics bear it out. 98%, I would say, is probably more like 99.9% of the people who are playing college athletes are not going to do that professionally, whatever they're doing. And the fundamentals of a well-rounded education, you just can't, I know there are economists that can put a value on it, but it's life-changing. So I don't want us to lose that in this whole discussion. And I know this is a very nuanced discussion about NIL, and it's very exciting, and I'm all for it. But I also think that getting a great education will make you even more valuable, whatever it is you choose to be. And I'm, of course, hoping they all become heart surgeons, but everybody's not going to be a heart surgeon. But you can do that at a place like the University of Arizona. So I just wanted to leave that final thought.
Yeah, no question. Totally agree with that. Well, I just want to, with that said, just thank, first of all, the panelists, unbelievable group of people that came in pretty quickly, and they have a lot of things they have to do right after this. So thank you all for being here today. Please give them a round of applause. And to just go by what you said, Dr. Robbins, thank you to the University of Arizona and the athletic department and the EDGE program for really giving people like Sam an opportunity that's cutting edge, leading the story here and leading the narrative really in the United States on this entire thing. So thank you, and thank you for everybody attending today.